Hey, it's Chris. Now obviously, what sets the 12 Pro Max apart from other iPhones is literally its size. Here it is next to a mini and a regular 12, just so you can visually compare. All right, but it doesn't just have a bigger screen. It also has a bigger battery, along with the physically bigger camera system. So just practically speaking, if you actually want to see things bigger on your screen, or if you want your battery to actually last you longer, or if you want to be able to technically take better photos and videos than the other iPhones, then it's a no-brainer to go with the Pro Max. But there's more to it than that, and I feel like this thing is a little bit misunderstood. So in this video, we're gonna start by talking about this camera setup here and how it differs from the other iPhone 12s. And I'm gonna actually point out where you're gonna be able to see noticeable differences between different iPhone models and the 12 Pro Max. We're gonna talk about some of the other size-related differences, but we're also gonna talk about how the iPhone 12 Pro Max is the most future-proof iPhone you can get and why that is. And I'm also gonna talk about some of this phone's biggest disappointments. All right, so first things first, feast your eyes on these camera bumps. One is physically bigger than the other. That's because the Pro Max has a larger stabilized sensor with bigger pixels, which means, yeah, it does take up more physical space than it does in other phones. It also has a faster main wide-angle lens along with a higher ISO and a new telephoto lens as well. So the sensor is bigger, but so are the lenses as well. Can you guys see that? These lenses are smaller than the Max's lenses. And the Max's lenses actually stick up, extrude further from the iPhone's body than on the other cameras. Yet, a lot of reviewers out there, including high-profile people like MKBHD, said that they couldn't really tell much of a difference with photos and videos. So, what gives? Well, as Nilay Patel over at The Verge pointed out, in great lighting conditions, all of the iPhones in this year's lineup basically end up producing photos that look pretty much the same. But where you start to see a night and day difference is when day turns into night. When there's not much light, the cameras on the iPhone 12 Pro Max outperform all other smartphones, not just iPhones. So because of the larger sensor and because it's a stabilized sensor, well, the iPhone 12 Pro Max doesn't have to kick into night mode as much as other iPhones. And when it does, it doesn't have to stay on for as long. So you can shave off some time from having to hold your phone still while taking a nighttime photo. And I actually like it when it doesn't kick into night mode as much because you end up with a more natural, less processed photo. Not only that's clearer with less noise, but that also takes less time to take. And not only that, but since this is a Pro iPhone, it also gained night sight on the ultra wide angle, which is not something that you're gonna get if you go with the Mini, for instance. So like Jonathan Morrison and Patrick Tomaso pointed out, night mode on the ultra wide angle does make a big and noticeable difference. So hopefully you're starting to see there are some real differences, but you gotta know where to look. Now, aside from lighting, something else is gonna matter if you're looking for differences between photos and videos shot on the Max versus the other iPhones is going to be motion. We have a sensor that's stabilized. So if your phone's not moving, that's not gonna kick in. So if you're sitting here trying to take a picture of something that's stationary, that's not moving, then photos out of both of these cameras are gonna end up looking very similar. On the other hand, if either you or your subject starts moving and all of a sudden the phone's moving too, that's where you might see some differences. So if you're trying to take a picture of a toddler that's moving around, or you're trying to take a picture out of a moving car, wherever there's motion introduced into your shots, that's where you should start seeing some big differences. Also, with any iPhone, there's a lot of computational photography happening where artificial intelligence is processing and editing your photos for you. So if you want to more plainly see the difference between shooting on other iPhones and the Pro Max, one thing that you can do is shoot in RAW on an app like Halide, where you don't get all this extra processing. The image just is with the raw data, you know, kind of like a pro photographer would do. iPhone Pro Max. So what happens when you're shooting in RAW is the algorithms aren't doing any editing for you. So as you take a look at this metadata from a raw photo, you'll notice there aren't multiple images that are being merged and stacked together to create something surreal. It's just as it was shot. So if you really want to see the difference, you want to put this camera system to the test, you can try shooting in RAW and then compare that with the computational photo that you just take with the regular photo app. And under those circumstances, it'll be a lot easier to tell what this upgraded camera stack is actually capable of doing. And speaking of RAW, the latest iOS update, which just came out recently, has the new Apple Pro RAW update, which gives us the best of both worlds, computational and RAW photography merged into one format, so you can do whatever you want to with a photo. What does that mean? Well, people who really care about RAW photos are gonna care about the Pro Max and this camera stack, and people who don't really care about editing in RAW probably aren't gonna need it. Also, the new Telephoto does let you get a little bit closer to your subjects, yes, all right, because it's now got 12x instead of 10x zoom. But what's really interesting about that is that the lens compression is maybe a little more flattering at a 65mm equivalent for the focal distance versus 52, which is what you get with 10 times zoom. So again, for a more pro photographer who cares more about how portraits look and how the nose and the eyes and the ears and all the spacing lines up, then that's something that's kind of cool. Now, in my own personal use, I've been able to use the Pro for pro video here in the studio, which has cinematic lighting, and other cameras don't really handle that or perform so well under the same conditions. I can now use the iPhone 12 Pro Max with its bigger sensor and those bigger pixels to shoot noise-free video under cinematic, moodier, darker lighting conditions, which I could never do before with an iPhone. Even shots at my old desk setup with a light, a window right next to me, those would have some grain and some noise, and it drove me nuts. But that's not a problem here anymore, and I love that. People love the A7S III because it's a low light beast as well. It has giant pixels, and instead of going for higher resolution, it went for better low light capabilities. Very similar to what you get with the 12 Pro Max. This thing is basically the A7S III of smartphones. Think about that for a second. Actually, for video people, the iPhone has become a must-have tool in the arsenal, right? It's not really replacing most people's full gear setup, but it's becoming supplemental to the point where I find myself needing to have an iPhone with me no matter what I'm doing, because it's just perfect for certain shots. It's the most convenient camera in certain situations. So when it comes to the cameras here, I mean, there are real differences, but I feel like most of it is progress that's been made in areas where most people probably won't notice, number one, and may not even care that much, number two. So I would say real differences, but in the end, maybe a little bit negligible. Even so, I think The Verge was right in pointing out that the 12 Pro Max is the best smartphone camera system that you can get. And hopefully now you have a better understanding of where you can actually see the differences that this camera system makes versus just shooting on any of the other iPhone 12s, and also why most people aren't gonna be able to spot or find the differences. So what I would say is, if you're not a pro photographer or videographer, you really don't need to upgrade to the Pro Max just for the camera system. Really, it's not necessary, seriously. On the other hand, if you just like having a bigger screen, then you will enjoy this amazing screen. The crazy thing is the Pro Max is almost so big that it's encroaching on tablet or iPad territory. It's kind of like an iPad that you can stick in your pocket, with one important exception: no multitasking, which is a major bummer, which we're gonna talk about in just a little bit. But it is just a more immersive experience watching and viewing and experiencing content on a bigger screen versus a smaller screen. Think about it like TV sizes. Like a 47-inch TV is great, but a 65-inch TV is greater, it's bigger, same content, but just scaled up. That's kind of what's happening here. Same content, no matter what phone you view it on, but scaled up. So that means that YouTube videos are gonna be more immersive, obviously. Playing your favorite game, that's also gonna be more immersive, for sure. Scrolling through Instagram is also gonna be more immersive, of course. Now, whether or not you want a smaller or larger phone is pretty much completely subjective. But I will say, I've been pretty surprised by how manageable and usable and enjoyable this enormous phone has been. I haven't blinked twice about it. Maybe I thought that it was gonna be so big that when I got it, it was just like, oh, that's it? I don't know, some people are saying it's enormous, it's unmanageable, but it hasn't been unmanageable for me. I haven't even thought about it. It's just been nice. Now, one super easy to understand concrete reason why someone might want to upgrade to the Pro Max is just the battery. It's a much bigger battery. It's a bigger phone, bigger size, more space to fit stuff inside. They fit in a bigger battery. And as you can see, I've been doing a lot of web surfing and gaming. And to be quite honest, I've experienced zero battery anxiety. You know, like when it kicks into low power mode and you start wondering, am I gonna have to charge it? And you're doing the battery math. Well, if I do this or that, no, I don't have to worry about it. And that's really nice. So yeah, if you really are wanting better battery life, that's a good reason to upgrade, as long as you don't end up minding this enormous size. Oh, and wait, I mean, it is heavier than other iPhones. Now, one of the themes that's running through all the different iPhone 12 Pro Max reviews is this theme of future proofing. There are several features on this phone that will give you some overhead, and you may not need that overhead now, but it's gonna be nice to have at some point in the future if you plan on holding onto your device for like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, or 6 or 7 or 8, no, just however long, 9 or 10 or 11 or 12. Like for instance, having 6 gigs of RAM. That's not a big deal right now. Maybe it's gonna mean that less of your apps get closed in the background, as may have happened with 4 gigs. But no one cares about that, really. But in the future, as apps and maybe the operating system itself gets more complicated, new things get added, new capabilities come out, you're not gonna feel like your phone's slowing down or bogging down like you might otherwise with only 4 gigs. So 6 gigs of RAM, that's legitimate overhead for the future. These phones have 5G antennas. Here in America right now, in late 2020, early 2021, it doesn't really matter. But again, if you're gonna keep this phone for several years into the future, maybe that 5G is gonna come in handy, but it's just not a reason to upgrade. Something that's pretty cool though is that you get double the amount of base storage with these Pro models here. So over the years, if you're gonna be adding a lot of apps and games and photos and videos shot in 4K and Dolby HDR, and your space starts dwindling, you'll have more headroom with the storage, just even with the base model. So that is nice. So kind of like Engadget pointed out in their review, a lot of the features for the Pro Max are overkill right now in 2020. But in the future, you may come to appreciate that you got those overkill features. So your future self could thank you. Your present self's gonna be like, meh. All right, so this is a big phone. It does have some big improvements for some people in some circumstances, but it also has some big disappointments, to be honest. I think the biggest one and the biggest missed opportunity here is just that the screen is bigger, but you can't do more with that extra real estate. Even though it's approaching tablet territory, you don't get any multitasking, so no split screen apps. That seems like a basic upgrade that makes sense because of the power that this thing has and the screen real estate that's just not there. It's conspicuously absent. Why? Just with the bigger screen, all you can really do is see things bigger, whether it's the icons themselves or a video that you're watching or something, but that's really underutilizing the screen real estate. Infamously, at this point, we don't have 120 Hertz on the display here, and Apple made a bet that people were not gonna care. Apple was like, hey, people can get by with just 60, they don't need 120 this year. And they were right, people are gonna get by without it, and it's not gonna be that big of a deal. 120 Hertz is not a must-have, but it's a nice to have though, that's for sure. It's been on the iPad Pro for a long time now. It just seems like a no-brainer to add that here and say, here's what's really different. There's something else that's conspicuously missing from this amazing camera system, and that is a periscopic zoom. This is a bigger phone body. There was more room, and they could have put in a periscopic zoom with some of that extra space, right? But they put in extra battery life. I do get that. Battery life's a concrete thing. Who's not gonna want more battery life? That makes sense. But at the same time, this is the pro device for people who make stuff. And if you're a photographer or a videographer, then that periscopic optical zoom could be a really big deal. You include a periscopic zoom and immediately everyone knows the difference between the Pro Max and the regular Pro or the other iPhones. And there's some other things. I mean, there's no Apple Pencil support. It'd be nice to come in with an Apple Pencil, maybe be able to scribble some notes. There's no USB-C. We're still stuck with Lightning here. I mean, I'm not a phone engineer. I don't know how it all works, But there are places that as a consumer, I could have said, hey, it would have been nice to have those. And it's disappointing that some of these things didn't make it. A lot of reviews just focus kind of on the specs and on the stuff that you could just go read on the website. So hopefully this was a little different in terms of what was covered, trying to just hit the actual distinguishing features and what's like really important for this particular phone. So anyways, I'll catch up with you guys on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at Daily Tech in both of those places, but you gotta spell it right. It's Tekk. Also, we have a podcast. You can check the link in the description if you wanna get connected there, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Later.